At 4:47 a.m., a prisoner is dragged from solitary confinement, wrists and ankles bound tight with plastic zip ties, his head shrouded in a white sack speckled with old bloodstains. Scrawled across his scarred back in jagged red ink are the words, "Not human, not worth living." No one shouts or reacts, only the steady rhythm of boots echoes as two guards haul his limp body down the icy stone corridor of Unit K3, a place where prisoners and wardens alike agree that some don't deserve release or a quick death. His name is Jackson Vell, 38 years old, convicted of molesting a minor, sentenced to 9 years, with no parole, no visitors, no pleas for clemency. But the real story lies not in the sentence, but in how the system punishes him, not through law, but through the silent permission it grants to those who turn a blind eye. At Silver Heights Penitentiary, there's no official manual for handling sex offenders. No one orders the beatings, the spitting, or the humiliation. Yet everyone knows that when a prisoner is marked red, the system has declared, "We're done intervening." Jackson doesn't resist or beg. Through the coarse fabric over his face, he only listens as one guard mutters, "Silence is part of rehabilitation, but turning it into a tool, that's the art of this place." You might think he deserves it, that his crimes are unforgivable, and you could be right. But when punishment slips beyond the law, molded into a tool of collective moral control, a question arises: who is truly reforming whom? Welcome to Unit K3, where punishment isn't about justice, it's about erasing your existence. When Jackson Vell wakes in his K3 cell, the first thing he sees isn't the ceiling, but 3 boot prints stamped on the wall, faded, blood-crusted, tilting left. A 4th print, fainter, suggests someone didn't get up in time to fight back. He lies on a sweat-soaked foam mattress. No blanket, no pillow, just a scratched iron spoon's message carved into the bed frame. Rayedi Chukton, no protection. No witnesses, no explanations. At Silver Heights Penitentiary, prisoners are sorted by 4 colors: green for minor offenses and good behavior, yellow for rule breakers not yet deemed dangerous, blue for violent types needing constant watch, and red, unofficial, absent from any rule book, whispered in rumors and etched in bruises no one dares question. Jackson is red. His first night, his meal tray is set apart far from the others. His soup holds a floating scrap of dirty cloth, maybe a discarded sock. He doesn't ask or swap it, understanding this first meal isn't for eating. It's a test of humiliation. A bald prisoner with claw tattoos on his neck leans over and whispers, "You read?" Jackson nods. The man smirks. "You'll get it. Here red means you exist, so others can feel righteous." Records claim Jackson was punished for disrupting the dining hall, but in his memory, there's only the sound of forced chewing and spoons scraping aluminum. Red prisoners don't ask why they're here or claim innocence. Red is a second sentence not from a judge, but from the disgust of those convinced they're on the right side. A new red prisoner, Donnie Charles, arrives Monday night, 32, dyed hair, small framed eyes, wild with panic. His crime mirrors Jackson's, but Donnie believes someone might still apologize to him. At his first roll call, Donnie's voice trembles. "I was framed. I didn't do it. They can check my file." A prisoner behind him stands, wordless, grabs Donnie's neck, slams his head twice into the bench's edge, and shoves him to the floor. The guard sees it, doesn't move, doesn't blink, just lifts his radio and says canteen cleanups 3 minutes late. By morning, Donnie stops talking. His back is crisscrossed with burns from boiling water mixed with soap splashed through his cell door at dawn. The medical report reads, "Prisoner fell during personal hygiene." On day 3, Jackson's taken to the communal showers where a patch of scratched paint reveals hundreds of tiny marks, slashes, cell numbers, initials, some with incomplete dates. A man shaving his head by the sink murmurs, "Don't stare." That's just the list of guys who thought they could live normally here. Jackson looks away, asks nothing but starts memorizing the numbers in his head, knowing what isn't written in reports, only survives in the next man's mind. On the seventh night, K3's hallway goes dark briefly. Jackson's pinned against the wall, an arm choking his throat, a strange voice hissing, "Heard you're the new Red." Don't care what you did, but if someone calls your name without your cell number, you don't answer. The lights flicker back on. A guard at the corridor's end sees Jackson, crumpled lips bleeding, looks down, taps his pen on the roster, and says, 4 minutes late for cell check. Last warning. No one asks who hit him. No one logs the incident. In Red, the law isn't on the walls, it's in the timing of a glance. A look at the right moment means go ahead. A look at the wrong one means we're deciding if you're worth keeping alive. In the Silver Heights Penitentiary kitchen, 3 red prisoners work under flickering fluorescent lights, among them Luis Cardozo, a silver-haired man in his 50s, once an Italian restaurant chef in New York, convicted of a crime no one names aloud. His food is so good that guards secretly stash portions for themselves, but Luis never tastes his own cooking. He seasons with a plastic spoon, head bowed, then turns away before the meal is served. Jackson watches and whispers, "Why cook for people who spat in your face yesterday?" Luis doesn't meet his eyes, only mutters, "I don't cook for them. I cook for the smell, to remember when I die that I made something even they couldn't hate outright." That afternoon, Jackson's meal tray is wrong. The rice is cold as stone, the ground meat laced with a long black hair, and at the bottom of his soup lies a small piece of human skin, veined and unmistakable. He doesn't flinch or speak. A prisoner across the table leans in and says, "That's no accident." It's a reminder, if you're still disgusted, you're still human. 4 tables to the left stand empty chairs untouched, not for lack of space, but because red prisoners sat there once, and no explanation is needed or given. On the 7th day, Terry, a 53-year-old red prisoner and former biology teacher, collapses in the dining hall. He hasn't eaten in 6 days, surviving on tap water hands resting on his thighs, eyes fixed on nothing, as if hearing echoes of his old lectures no one cares to hear anymore. Before he dies, Terry whispers to Jackson, his voice faint as wind through a cracked door, "Every bite I take is me agreeing I'm not human anymore. So I starve to die with something they haven't digested." Luis scrubs a soup pot. Jackson stares at his tray, not hungry but cold. Not from the food, but from the thought to survive here, he must choose eat and forget, or starve and remember. At 1:38 a.m. on the 9th night, Jackson is summoned from his cell. No patrol log, no witnesses. 2 guards in plain clothes lead him to an unmarked iron door labeled EMU Zone Emotional Management Unit. Inside, no main lights, just the glow of a large ceiling-mounted screen. Jackson's hands are bound, and he's seated before a camera, empty chairs lined behind him. A white man about 50 enters and says, "We live stream for cadet guards to practice behavior regulation. You won't be beaten, you'll just be shown. So don't do anything too ugly." For the next 20 minutes, Jackson is ordered to sit still and stare at photos of child victims, read his own charges aloud, and smile. If his smile falters, cold water is doused over him. Each time he stammers, "I don't know why," a hard plastic pipe cracks against his knee. The ceiling camera blinks, capturing every grimace, tagged as instinctual response data. Afterward, he's not returned to his old cell, but rotated to 3B home to Glenn Pearson, a blue level 2 prisoner who once killed a red for touching his water cup, rewarded with cigarettes for stable behavior. Glenn doesn't strike Jackson, just glares through the dark, tossing Jackson's charge sheet to the floor. Read it. Every line. No pauses. Swallow, and I hit you once. Jackson reads, voice hoarse eyes, avoiding the words, each syllable biting his throat. When he finishes, Glenn doesn't hit him, only mutters, "You gotta hear yourself to know what you're worth." On the last night of the week, Jackson wakes to being dragged from his cell, no orders given. Stripped naked, his limbs bound with bedsheet strips, he's hoisted onto the EMU zone's iron door with large fishing hooks. His mouth is gagged with a soiled shoe insole. No one beats him. They just pass by. They just look. For 6 hours, no one cuts him down. At dawn, a rookie guard, the first to spot him, freezes, but an older supervisor claps his shoulder and says, "Take him down. Clean him up, feed him. He's red. As long as he's not dead, the system's working fine." That night, Jackson doesn't cry or sleep. He stares at his rope-burned hands and wonders if today he endured pain to survive, what will he suffer for tomorrow. Her name is Monroe, a new guard 4 days into her assignment at the Red Unit. No tattoos, no dark sunglasses, no gruff voice. After Jackson's night strung up on the EMU zone door, she's the first to enter at dawn, seeing him crusted with dried blood, behind his neck, hands purpled with rope burns. She doesn't shout or scold, just turns away silently, returning with a clean cloth and warm water to wash his hands and face. In a whisper, she asks, "Who allowed this?" Jackson doesn't answer. She nods, as if understanding that no one needs to answer that question. Back in her office, she files an internal memo, not public, just logged into the management system. The next day, Monroe's gone from the shift roster. No one mentions why. Her badge slot in the security room is labeled "On Leave, Return Date TBD." Her access to K3's camera system is permanently revoked. The following night, Jackson passes through the auxiliary corridor, pausing before a small, outdated camera angled in a corner, its red light off. He thinks it's broken, but when he looks up, its lens swivels to meet his gaze. No beep. No recording light. A guard's voice cuts through from behind. "Think that thing's dead. It works, but only when it needs to. If it's not blinking, someone's watching, and they're not ready to stop what's happening." Jackson keeps walking silent, a shiver running through him, realizing the system doesn't lack cameras, just reasons to intervene. The next morning, he limps into the infirmary, shoulder swollen, lip split, requesting only anti-inflammatory meds, not mentioning the beating. The nurse, an older woman, glances at his bruises, snaps her ledger shut, and says softly, almost apologetically, "If you can still walk in here, I don't need to write anything down. I don't hurt anyone, but I don't save anyone without a protection code either." Jackson nods, thanks her, and leaves. In that moment, he understands no one in this place is truly silent. They're all just waiting for someone else to speak first. Leo Thomas, 62, a former high school literature teacher, carries an unforgivable crime, but remains the only Red prisoner still writing with a pen. One day after Monroe, the only guard who dared clean blood from Jackson's hands, worked her shift. Leo drafts a 3-page memo, not justifying or complaining, just documenting with quiet precision the reality of the Red Unit prisoners left under the sun for 5 hours, as unofficial punishment meals laced with substances no one names. Cameras that fail but always record when silence is needed. At the memo's end, in red ink centered on the page, he writes, "If I'm no longer human, at least spell my name right in the report." He slips the note into the internal mailbox unseen. 3 days later, Leo is taken to the high-security infirmary, cited for self-harm tendencies, requiring psychological treatment. When he returns, he can't speak. His tongue has been cut. The prison doctor's report reads, "Prisoner exhibits self-harm after reactive depression, unable to record speech due to complete loss of articulation." No one asks questions or notifies family. Leo sits in a corner daily scratching words into his palm with his nails. That night, Jackson sees him smear soup-dampened fingers on the wall. Silence is the first medicine for forgiveness. 2 days later, at noon's dead quiet, the K3 intercom crackles on untouched by any switch. A muffled, choked voice like it's rising from a deep pit fills the air. We don't ask for forgiveness. We just want, if we're punished, let our names be written right. 18 seconds later, the sound cuts off. No one claims the broadcast. No one mentions it. That night, Leo is moved to Unit F, the ward for speechless prisoners, each wearing a gray neck-tag. When Jackson asks a guard why the reply is soft, Unit F is where you don't need to talk anymore. Because there no one needs to be heard. Dr. Aisha Monroe, 36. A clinical psychologist who once worked with soldiers recovering from battlefield trauma, arrives at Silver Heights Penitentiary to establish a therapy program for prisoners showing psychological distress from prolonged isolation. She's barred from asking about their crimes, keeping records after sessions, or holding keys to the red unit. Someone must always unlock the door for her. Yet she's allowed to walk alone. Each time she enters the red unit, the corridor falls silent. Cell doors show only slivers of light. No greetings, no shouts, no crude remarks, like in other prisons, just an eerie hush. What unsettles her most are the cameras densely mounted, their footage ignored, and no one ever asks what she sees. One evening, logging into the internal system to take notes, Monroe notices a blinking icon. Clicking it reveals a hidden, untitled file marked Phase 3, Empathy Test, Outsider. Its contents are brief. Measure emotional response of specialist in red environment. Subject Monroe Aisha. Duration 14 days. Objective assess efficacy of moral reflex suppression through controlled silence. Note, do not respond. Do not intervene. Do not rescue. She freezes, realizing she came to help prisoners, but the system is studying her reactions. The next day, she returns to the red unit and meets Jackson in a makeshift therapy room. He sits unrestrained, no cuffs or ropes, but avoids her gaze. Softly, she says, "You can share anything. I'm here to listen, not judge." Jackson stays silent, only tapping the table in a deliberate rhythm, 1-3-2-4. Dr. Aisha Monroe initially mistakes Jackson's tapping for nervous tension. But that night, while sifting through code-breaking manuals, she realizes it's Morse code spelling turnaround. The next morning in the camera control room, she rewinds the previous day's footage, finding a ceiling-mounted camera angled down, capturing her talking to Jackson, while another figure peers through a cell door's slit, not at her, but directly into the lens behind her. She stands silent, grasping for the first time that she's not here to observe, but is part of the experiment, and the only one communicating with her is a prisoner without words. 3 days after meeting Jackson, Monroe says nothing to the supervisors, but slows her pace through the red unit's corridors, her eyes tracing dried bloodstains in floor corners, her fingers brushing doors, bearing names of prisoners erased from records. She requests a safe touch therapy session, a wordless contact method used for PTSD veterans, and the warden approves with indifference. She chooses Jackson, who sits motionless, hands bound to the chair with white duct tape in a silent ritual. When she places her hand on his, Jackson speaks for the first time. "They touched me differently, also without words, but they didn't ask first." That evening, an unmarked envelope appears on her desk, containing a grainy black and white Polaroid, a red prisoner pinned face down on concrete, naked, 3 blue prisoners behind him, one wearing medical gloves, and in the frame's corner, the edge of Monroe's forehead revealing she was the photographer. She doesn't report it or scream, just breathes deeply and returns to the red unit the next morning. Jackson isn't in his cell. The guard on duty says only transferred for physical assessment. Reds need periodic physiological control, you should know. She's led to Wrist 5, an unmapped section of small rooms with frosted glass reeking of chlorine and baby soap. In the last room, Jackson sits shirtless, hands trembling back, bruised red. On the table lies a cup of cold water and a damp washcloth. "No cameras," she asks. "What did they make you do?" He doesn't answer, only repeats evenly. "Physiological reflexes are recorded periodically on schedule. If I don't respond enough, they wake me." Another way. Back in the security office, Monroe opens the internal red files, finding under the physiological column, Forced Emotional Response Capacity, FERC. Conducted every 3 days, no recording required, no signatures needed. That night, she returns home but leaves her door unlocked, sits at her desk and writes her first handwritten report, bypassing the system. 1 page, no codes, no signature, just a single line. "I'm no longer here to measure silence. I want to know how much pain has been logged as data that no one remembers," once screamed aloud. At 22:43, Dr. Aisha Monroe slips back into the empty office, the digital archive vault unlocked, with her internal badge. She types FERC, the acronym Jackson recited like a memorized script, into the system, and a folder labeled FERC STIM Data V3 appears. Inside is an Excel sheet with over 700 rows, each tied to a red prisoner code, R201, R202, R203. Columns track reflex hardening index, RHI, forced arousal latency, and post-stim behavior deviation, with a final column of notes, recommended action, recycle, retest, archive. No names, just numbers and metrics. She digs deeper into the extended records, uncovering a funding entry for the Moral Reflex Initiative, MRI, described as a collaboration between Silver Heights and a non-governmental ethics research group aimed at eliminating deviant behavior through deep neural reflex conditioning. Its logo, a spiral, matches the mark etched on Jackson's left hand after his physical assessment. The initiative's representative is Professor Jonathan LeClaire, now a Level 1 supervisor in Silver Heights Administrative Wing. Monroe's hands tremble as she opens a video from the training archive folder. The screen darkens, revealing a man in a dress shirt, his voice calm, as if lecturing on breathing techniques. "Welcome to Protocol 7 training. Today we'll learn to identify the last biological responses in subjects who once thought themselves human." The camera pans to a model, a bound prisoner, mouth agape, head, tilted eyes fixed on the ceiling. When trainees observe leg twitches or chest arching, it signals lingering human sensation. Apply increased pressure, but not to the point of breaking. We need their reflexes not for survival, but for continued data collection. Monroe shuts off the monitor, plunging the room into darkness. The only sound, the faint whine of the server. She doesn't cry or speak, just writes a single line in her notebook. "I thought I came to help. Now I know I'm a calculated witness." And Jackson isn't data. He's evidence. Jackson doesn't wait for Dr. Aisha Monroe to enter the cell as usual. That day he stands pressed against the door, as if he knew she was coming. He says nothing, just locks eyes with her, then pulls from his inner pocket a small, sharp object, a jagged piece of crimson plastic, its edges scorched and chipped. He places it in her hand, light as a final whisper. This belonged to R309. They called him Flea. No one remembers his name, but he scratched into it with something sharp. "We spoke once, but the system has no ears." Jackson looks up, his gaze no longer frantic or submissive, and asks, "Do you have ears?" Monroe doesn't answer, only clutches the fragment, her fingers tightening faintly. Jackson continues, "Say I die tomorrow during a physiological check. What will the report say? Respiratory failure, non-compliance, unresponsive." He pauses, his eyes meeting hers like a final plea. What would you add? So I'm not just a line of behavioral dysfunction. Monroe stays silent, neither nodding nor shaking her head, then stands and leaves the cell, avoiding the door handle, as if fearing to leave a trace. The next morning, when Jackson's meal tray arrives, a small paper folded thrice lies beneath the liner, unprinted, bearing only faint pencil scrawl. No one told me to look away, but I did, and I stayed silent. Jackson reads it, neither smiling nor sighing, just folds the note and presses it to his chest, before lying down, staring at the ceiling, as if waiting for a voice that for the first time might truly want his response. On day 274, Dr. Aisha Monroe receives an email from an unfamiliar address, if.relay. Mail.drop, with no subject or body, only a single attachment, moral, reflex, integration, internal, PDF. She opens it, revealing a detailed budget ledger for transactions between Silver Heights Penitentiary and the Moral Reflex Initiative MRI, the ethics organization, whose spiral logo she recognized on Jackson's data. Every entry bears official stamps, warden signatures, payment codes, and funds allocated for supporting physiological reflex research on red subjects. A red note at the bottom warns you are being monitored as an external moral reflex variable. Any silence after 0000 on day 275 will be recorded as deliberate indirect cooperation. No sender is named, no reply possible. That afternoon, Monroe visits Jackson's cell, finding the door unlocked for the first time. He sits upright, neither questioning nor nodding. She stands still, then asks, as if seeking permission. If I have to testify in court, if I'm forced to speak about what you've endured, would you want me to say your name? Jackson pauses, then gently pulls a paper folded in quarters from under his hand. Unfolded, it reveals 4 words scrawled in smudged fingerprints on worn paper: I no longer have a name. He meets her gaze, unafraid, unyielding, without blame, and says softly, "You can call me R201, but if you do, say it like I'm still human." The next morning, Monroe enters her office to find a sealed federal envelope. Inside is a summons from the Eastern District Court, Operation Hollow Echo, preliminary hearing on human rights violations, collusion with civilian research organizations, and crimes against detained sex offenders. Her name appears under Item 5, Aisha Monroe, specialist interacting with Red Group direct witness. A note adds, failure to appear will be considered evasion of federal investigation. If testifying as a witness, you will be immune from prosecution. If you refuse, all prior interactions will be reanalyzed as passive complicity. She folds the paper, neither trembling nor crying, then stands and walks to the door, clutching the broken crimson plastic Jackson gave her. In the hallway's light, its etched words stand clear. We spoke once, but the system has no ears. She tucks it into her pocket and whispers, unheard by others, "This time, I'll be the ears." Dr. Aisha Monroe enters the H-floor archive room, where all processed records are compressed into codes, no names remaining. She doesn't search by name, none exist here, and instead types the code R000 into the system. A single file appears, devoid of photos or dates, only a note, pre-deployment test subject not reintroduced. She opens it, and a grainy audio clip plays, filled with static, carrying the soft, clear voice of a child, not crying, not moaning, just whispering when they told me to be quiet. I was. But the sound in my head wouldn't stop. She digs deeper, pulling up old camera logs, finding blurry footage of a 12-year-old boy led into a physiological testing room. Eyes wide, unresisting, hands clenched tight. When a doctor touches him, the boy speaks once, not shouting, "If I don't fight back." It doesn't mean I agree. He's tagged R000, his file later marked, "Non-reactive, insufficient metrics, not continued." But Monroe uncovers a hidden file, silent pilot, prototype, WAV, and plays it a recording of the boy's final session before he vanished. I don't need their forgiveness. I just need someone not to speak for me. They talk about me like I'm gone, but I'm still here. Monroe stands clutching the transcript, her gaze fixed on the archive room's spiral logo. For the first time, she understands she's not alone, not the first to hear. She's just the only one who's survived long enough to truly start listening.